All right, here we go. We actually have a super important story to talk about here. This is pretty crazy. A lot of people are potentially going to be affected by this, but I'm going to sort of explain what's going on and how this is going to play out. So, this article here says Graham to introduce legislation to end birthright citizenship. So, Donald Trump was it's kind of weird because he was doing this interview with Axios, and somehow Axios got the information prior to the interview that he was planning to attempt to end birthright citizenship through executive order, despite it being in the 14th Amendment. And so they asked him about it, and he was like, "Whoa, like, well, how the hell did you know that?" Which is kind of weird. But anyways, let's read this article. So this says. It says Senator Lindsey Graham on Tuesday said that he will introduce legislation to end birthright citizenship after President Trump suggested he wanted to do so through an executive order. Quote, "Finally, a president willing to take on this absurd policy of birthright citizenship. I've always supported comprehensive immigration reform and at the same time, the elimination of birthright citizenship." He added that he plans to introduce legislation along the same lines as the proposed executive order from Trump. Congress is out of session until November 13th. If Graham is going to propose legislation to amend the Constitution, his bill will need to win over not only two-thirds majority of it in Congress, but also be ratified by three-quarters of the states. His announcement comes hours after Trump said in an interview released Tuesday that he will sign the executive order intended to end the practice of birthright citizenship. It was always told to me that you needed a constitutional amendment. Guess what? You don't. You can definitely do it with an act of Congress, but now they're saying I can do it just with an executive order. We're the only country in the world where a person comes in and has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States with all those benefits. Most countries in the Western Hemisphere, including Mexico and Canada, have some form of birthright citizenship. That wasn't Trump's quote. That was The Hill speaking. Okay, so this is insane on so many different levels. It's unbelievable. So first layer, there's so many layers to this, right? I'm going to try to make sure I get to all of them. The first layer being the idea that Donald Trump thinks that he can do this through an executive order is aneurysms on the spot. You can't do an executive order that undermines a constitutional amendment guarantee, which is what the 14th Amendment guarantees, naturalized citizenship for people who are born here. So you can't just do an executive order. The Constitution is literally the ultimate. It's the supreme, and you can't infringe upon those that are set. And so you can't just sign an executive order and then just override the Constitution. You'd have to be a complete imbecile to think so. You're wrong. What'll end up happening if he actually ends up doing that, which we don't even know if it's really going to happen. What'll end up happening is this will get challenged. It'll go to some court, probably a district court. It'll get probably in a probably emergency stay, where basically just it stops. It's not put in place for the time being, and then it'll continue going through the appeals process. It'll probably go to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court will most likely, well, hopefully, assuming that we know now that there's a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, so they might just be, totally partisan and not care what the Constitution says. But assuming they're at all, objective, they will 100% shut this down because it simply is not in any way, shape, or form, constitutional to do that. Now, Graham, he says he's going to. Here's the thing: Lindsey Graham saying this is insane because these are supposedly supposed to be the constitutional conservatives. This is basically the entire conservative movement, essentially, outside of the fringe conservative movements. It's the Ben Shapiro, Paul Ryan, supposedly stuff, where it's like, we're strict constitutionalists. We want to have the government stick by, the specific enumerated powers, and outside of that, just stay out of my life. Let's keep these constitutional amendments and just roll with what's going on. This is totally, despite that. And so the fact that these people who claim to be constitutional conservatives, but I don't even know Trump knows what the 14th Amendment is. I highly doubt it. He definitely didn't know before he's president. 100% didn't know that. But again, If this legislation that he passes is a constitutional, or he proposes, my apologies, if he proposes it, it's a constitutional amendment. Are you kidding me? You think you're going to be able to get 3/4 of Congress, which you're not going to be able to get, or you think you're going to get 3/4 of the states to ratify it? Holy smokes, you're stupid. You are insane if you actually think that's going to happen. That honestly, one of the big issues with getting a constitutional amendment in today's day and age is we are so hyper polarized at this point that I don't even know how we're going to get any more constitutional amendments passed, because the process is such a deadlock. And it makes sense why the process is so deep. It has to be, right? But I just can't foresee any situation in which we ever have honestly another one passed. But that's not going to happen. But here's the last thing I want to mention. He said that he plans to introduce it. But the thing is that it's out of session until November 13th. Congress isn't in session right now. You know what that means? This is probably BS. It's probably BS. It's most likely, at least on the Graham spot, it might just be a midterm poll. On the Trump spot, I don't know. I'm really not sure. I have no idea. But this is scary stuff, okay? These are the big issues that come with the Trump presidency, right? This is some dictatorship type stuff where you're just like, yeah, I'll just sign the executive order that undermines the Constitution. Fuck undermine, override the Constitution. That's some dictatorship shit. That's not democracy. That's not a constitutional republic. That's a dictatorship. I don't give a fuck what the Constitution says. I'm going to do it through executive action. I'm going to undermine the Constitution. Blatant terms in the 14th Amendment. I'm going to override it through executive power. That's insanity, dude. That's insanity.